Here is.
Hi, Louise.
How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing?
All good, all good. Early morning, just starting the day.
Yeah, whereabouts are you based? You're in Scandinavia?
I'm in Sweden, yes.
Yeah, cool. Let me just check some tech.
Yep, let me give you permission to do so.
How many people are you expecting?
Around 40 something. As it is the first session, it's really early for some people, maybe a
Yeah.
little less, like 30, but around 40 people.
Okay.
And then
And where are they from? Are they early career, mid-career,
they
um,
they are from,
startups?
yeah, they are all from impact hubs. So they are basically people that work at impact hubs from all over the world, and they can be in any different role, doing different things at impact hubs, but they are the impact hub staff.
Impact Up staff. Got it.
Yeah,
Okay.
cool. It works. And then just to check with you, do you prefer that I introduce you, give you the first question on introducing um what the economies are, what the regenerative economies are, and then you go for the presentation, or would you like to, how would you like, where would you like to put the presentation?
Yeah, good question. Well, I mean, we could start with just a warm-up question,
Mm-hmm.
like what did you what would you prefer? I'm just trying to bring up your questions again. Uh,
Because we can start with like with the first question, and then you can just introduce to us what regenerative economies is, when you're talking about that, and then we go to the second question, which is a little more deep. So talking about this becoming more mainstream, what is our role, stuff like this. And then you can maybe, I don't know specifically what you have in your presentation, but maybe you can bring your presentation here.
yeah, okay. All right, because I mean, it's a very, yeah, they're not detailed slides. It's really just to
Mhm.
give it a bit of an overview. And it covers off what is a regenerative enterprise,
Mm-hmm.
um, and and a little bit on catalytic finance, which
Mm-hmm.
is, the space that I work in within impact investing. And then we can kind of base the rest of your questions on that if you want.
Yep. Cool. So let's do it like this. Hey everyone. Let's just, we're gonna wait like 5 minutes as it is the first session. Early for most of the people. So if you wanna get some water, in 5 minutes we kickstart.
Good morning.
Morning. We're waiting some more minutes as it is early morning for many people, just to wait for more people to join, and then we start in 4 minutes. Cool. So I see that people are arriving. Hey everyone, morning, afternoon, night for those who are already in night times. We're waiting just 2 more minutes to wait for some more people to join us, and then we're gonna kickstart. And it would be nice if everyone, when you join, just try to change your name, rename yourself to add your Impact Hub, or if you're a community partner, just add the name of your company so we also know who is in the room. So the other makers can also see you, understand who's in the room. And we're going to wait 1 more minute to start the session. Cool. So we can start. More people are going to join at some point, but we can already start. So let me start with the technicalities. I'm going to be recording the session, so just everyone know. Here we go. Welcome everyone. I'm super excited to kickstart the Makers Festival 2023 with this first session of the 3 days agenda that we have. As you all might know, we have sessions happening today, tomorrow, and the day after, with many content for not just the Impact Hubs, but also for our community partners. We have some sessions that are being broadcasted to our members as well. This is one of the sessions that we have invited members to also watch the session. So we might have also some people watching the session in the Impact Hubs, but not actually participating here on the Zoom, because we're also broadcasting the session on the YouTube for our members connected in our Impact Hubs or globally as we have our global members. So to kickstart, I'm really excited with this conversation for this first session, which is called Regenerative Economy and Climate Resilience. We have invited Rhys. So Rhys Proudfoot, he is the co-founder of Regenerative. Until mid-2023, Rhys spent 6 years as head of innovation and impact investment at WWF Australia. While at WWF, he co-founded Panda Labs and WWF ACE Innovation Accelerator, now operating in many offices in WWF Global Network. He works for focuses on expanding the shift to a regenerative economy by facilitating collaboration between unlikely allies. His current focus with Regenerative, his company, is on catalyzing the regenerative enterprise and regenerative finance sector, working hand in hand with local communities, corporate partners, impact investors, and governments. So connecting those different and not so likely allies. And that's why we have invited him. So if you want to say hi, Rhys, just so we know where you are.
Hi, everyone. It's great to be here. I'm joining from a little town just outside of Sydney, Australia.
Cool. Thanks. And okay, so in this session, we'll explore the concept of regenerative economy and its pivotal role in addressing climate resilience. Basically, a regenerative economy represents a shift from extractive business model, emphasizing positive contributions to nature and society. And we want here to make a conversation. It's basically a conversation. That's why we invited everyone to be in the Zoom together to talk with Rhys. He has prepared some stuff to bring us a little bit of an overview of what we're talking about. but everyone is invited just to ask questions. That's what is going to move the session. I have prepared some questions, but also it is open for everyone who wants to participate and ask questions, understand a little bit more of what it is when we're talking about regenerative economy, impact investment, and things like this. Riz has a good background on that. So please, I invited everyone who wants to participate, just raise your hand and then we can make a good conversation. But then to quick start, Riz, I would love if you could just explain to us a little bit more what it is when we're talking about regenerative economies, regenerative businesses. What is it that we're going to be talking today?
Yeah, sure. So thanks for having me. Just while I'm talking, I would love to know a little bit more about who we have on the call as well. So it'd be great if you could please just pop into the chat. I can see by your names where you're dialing in from, but maybe a little bit about what you do, like if you work with startups or if you work with finance or impact investment, just so I can get a sense of kind of who's on the call and what it is that you do. Maybe you work in marketing or design. Just pop it in the chat, and that would be great. So yeah, I would define a regenerative economy in really simple terms as an economy that heals the future rather than steals from the future. And I didn't make that up. Other clever people made that up. But for me, it's as simple as that. We are living with the consequences of an extractive economy, an extractive economic paradigm, where there are negative impacts like social inequality and climate change and biodiversity loss, that are the results of the way that our economy operates. And so for me, a regenerative economy or regenerative economic paradigm is an economy that heals the future by supporting positive nature regeneration, positive social regeneration, and driving wealth back into communities rather than centralizing wealth within the hands of a few.
Nice. And then we were talking about regenerative businesses. Can you also explain a little more of what it is?
Yeah, like I work with regenerative businesses. The work, I mean, I call them regenerative enterprises. These are small to medium-sized businesses. It's not to say that corporates can't be regenerative businesses. There are some corporations that I know that are doing really good work, that are moving towards models where they are, regenerative. But it's obviously harder for a corporate. They have very, very big supply chains, and it's harder for them to move from a model of extraction to a model of sort of ESG kind of based, environmental, social, governance based work to models of sustainability, and then ultimately models of regeneration. I think a lot of businesses, corporates, are doing really good work to do no harm. Obviously, that's great. Do no harm is great. Then to get to a place of equilibrium, which is sustainability, okay, that's great. Unfortunately, we don't have the luxury, our generation doesn't have the luxury of settling for sustainability anymore. We're already in deficit across many planetary boundaries. So regenerative businesses for me are businesses that contribute to helping us get out of deficit. They are helping to restore and regenerate our natural capital, our financial capital, our social capital, human capital. So businesses that actively contribute to regenerating those systems, I would class as regenerative. The businesses that I work with, which are sort of small to medium sized, they're startups basically, small to medium sized businesses. They mostly they'll contribute across positive sort of biodiversity regeneration, positive social impact, and positive economic impact. So that means, not centralizing wealth, but, models where wealth can be shared or wealth can be driven back into communities, community-led ownership models, cooperative models, mutuals. So very, very innovative, very catalytic models that are experimenting with new forms of finance and new structures for business. And I think it's so great to see this conversation at Impact Hub, because the case for innovation is huge. The most important thing that we can do now as an innovation community to speed up the shift towards a regenerative economy is support experimentation at scale all around the world, because we need to create, test, validate, and scale these new models, these new regenerative business models. And so it's great to see this conversation happening around where design and innovation can play a role in that.
Nice, that's super interesting. And I feel that during the sessions we're going to have throughout the day specifically, but also throughout the other days in the Makers Festival, we're going to touch a little bit more on that, specifically on just anyone who has the microphone on, can you? But we're going to touch a little bit more in this conversation. This is something super interesting. I think like when we talk about, I think something that we are bringing a lot in this Makers Festival conversations is about green growth. And we're talking about growing, is it possible to actually say that green growth is possible to the world that we live in? And then when we talk about regenerative economies or regenerative businesses, that represents a lot on what needs to be done. If we're talking about, is it growth that the world is needing? Is it the same type of economics that we need to perpetuate to keep doing the things as we do? Or should we change completely the paradigm and understand economics in a different way to experiment different things? So it's super nice. I'm going to connect that to the second question that I would like to explore with you. Understanding that we consider our society as a guided society by economic growth for development, where businesses and investors are actually running on that paradigm. And we're talking about a different way of approaching economics that consider the needs of humanity, but also integrates the necessities of our planet and its ecosystems to keep functioning the way we know it. What is our role and what are the challenges we're facing and will be facing to make such a transition conversation become mainstream? Not only for businesses, but also for investors, considering the like impact hubs specifically, we are this middle part between businesses, small businesses, ideas, startups that are popping up all around the world. And we're connecting these businesses to different investors, but also to government, to different players. How do you see the role of not just us as like this middle part, but also these businesses that are popping up? And for this, I think you have some examples from your background. So it would be nice to explore that with you.
Okay, that's a huge question. So like why don't we unpack it in little bits, right?
Yep.
So before I have got some slides, so the slides, yeah, like pretty top level. I'll run through them. It won't take very long. But we are on the cusp of a huge economic transition, and that economic transition means opportunity, right? So at a very basic level, there is billions, if not trillions of dollars flowing into decarbonization around the world, right? Finally, like the message has got through, like climate change is really serious. We've got to do something about it, and we've got to do something about it yesterday. So there is now more finance than ever flowing into decarbonization. Now, the challenge for us is that could flow into decarbonization in an economic paradigm that perpetuates the way that things have always been, right? So the rich get richer. We continue to centralize wealth. We continue to work with extractive models. Now, an example of that would be where, large-scale renewable hydrogen, gigaplants or large-scale renewables are still extractive. They're still exploiting workers, they're still damaging nature. So the transition is going to happen, but how do we make it happen in a way that is fair and equitable, that regenerates nature, that supports local communities and Indigenous people? So that's one question, right, that we've got to think about as the business community. Like, how do we prove those kinds of models that are going to make sure that this huge economic opportunity, right, is going to happen in the right way? Now, so that's within the current status quo. I think the more exciting question is about how do we shift the whole system? So at a very simple level, right, we're working with an economic model that rewards bad behavior. So the model incentivizes polluters to pollute, and it incentivizes fast food to be consumed because it's the cheapest, and no one has to pay, or those companies don't pay for when people get sick because of fast food. The companies don't pay when nature is damaged because of pollution, right? So that economic model is broken. So in terms of your question around how we might, oh, okay, I can see me on the screen now. That's that's really funny. I'm just going to minimize it or move this screen. So in terms of your question around, is green growth possible? That's what we've got to try and innovate together. Okay, I think we need to make sure we work within an economic system, right? And clearly, we're not going to completely scrap and eradicate capitalism overnight. So we need to think about the kind of levers that we have to pull. So those people that are working in big corporations have really important roles to play in saying, how do we shift policy levers so that big corporations are incentivized to not pollute, or they're incentivized to regenerate nature? So that's where things like the TNFD, the Task Force for Nature-Related Financial Disclosure, comes in, right? We need those big global policy plays that shift the incentive structures in our economy. So that's kind of, I guess, at a macro level, to answer your question, that work needs to happen. Now, how do we get there? Storytelling, right? Storytelling is so important. We've got to tell a story that makes people want to be part of that future. Now, I come from a climate campaigning background. Before I was involved in innovation, I spent many years as a climate change campaigner in Australia. And we learned the hard way that if you want to get people on board for big change, don't tell them how hard it's going to be and how much they got to sacrifice and how we're all doomed, right? No one wants to be on that team. People want to be on the team where there is a really bright, engaging, positive version of the future. So when it comes to these new models, we need to be telling really great stories about the kind of future we can have when regenerative businesses and regenerative innovation and regenerative finance is mainstream. So what does that mean in our daily lives? What does that mean in our day-to-day, how we go to school, the more time that we can spend with our communities, the more time we can spend with our family, the more creative we can be, the more we can focus on the arts. So the end goal here isn't regenerative economy, it's regenerative society. The regenerative economy is the way that we get there. So I guess, in answer to your question around, those big kind of structural changes that need to happen, yes, we need to focus on policy. We also need to focus on storytelling, right? Because that's how we're going to take the business community and the investment community and the finance community and the politicians and everyone else on the journey with us. Now, at the same time, we need to be doing the innovation to prove these new models can work. We need to be getting in the labs. My business is called Regen Labs, right? Regeneration Labs, right? Because we need to be getting our hands dirty. We need to be experimenting with new models of finance and new models of business, new models of organizing ourselves in our communities, new models of governance. Like all of these new models we need to be experimenting with. So yeah, look, would it be useful, Louise, if I just share a few slides now to give some examples?
Yeah, I think it would be nice. Yes.
Okay, all right. And it's better than looking at myself on my screen as well. So I'll just pop this up and present. Cool. All right. Can you see a big picture saying Regen Labs?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So I'll just take a few steps back. As I was saying, right, we know our generation no longer has the luxury of just being sustainable, right? I think everyone would have seen this diagram. This is the planetary boundaries diagram. It's different in every country. So this is the diagram for Australia. Every country is different. There is also a global diagram. But essentially what this is saying is we are way outside the safe zone when it comes to impacts across climate change, across species loss, across landscape, land changes, across waste, across dangerous chemicals. So unfortunately, because of this extractive economic model, just staying where we are is no longer enough. We need to actually regenerate to get back into the green zone, right? That's the case for regeneration and a regenerative economy. So sustainability, great, right? We've made good progress. Now we need to take it further. And business and corporates and finance can play a key role. Now, in Australia, the big moment for us in Australia, thinking about big transition points, the big moment for us was the bushfires we had 3 years ago. That was huge in Australia because there was a national conversation about, okay, everyone woke up in Australia finally, and we've got to start doing things differently. But the other interesting thing happened is that we saw the role of communities step up and play a leading role. So where in society we have institutions, we have government, and we have banks, and we have churches, and we have political institutions. But actually, in Australia, it was the community, right, that stepped up and led the recovery effort in Australia. And so what we're seeing now is communities now going to the next step, saying, well, we stepped up when we needed to in terms of recovering from natural disasters. What would it look like if we actually also were in charge of our economic future as well? And so what we're seeing around Australia is this new generation of regenerative enterprises that are embedded in communities, that are led by communities that understand their own agency. They are co-creators and co-designers because they understand their place, they understand their regions. And they are catalyzing this shift to a regenerative economy. And that's great, right? So we're seeing these pockets of innovation bubbling up all around the country, and it's actually happening all around the world. I've got people that I know in the Impact Hub network that are doing really great work with communities as well, right? So you've got that happening. But there is a deficit because in our existing economy, most of the resources and finance go towards the status quo. They go towards, privileged startups or privileged businesses in cities that, are being great and being innovative and being sustainable, but are still part of the current economic model. So how do we make sure when we're thinking about catalyzing innovation at scale around the country that resources and skills and finance are going to these where it's most needed, which is these community-led regenerative enterprises? I'm not going to spend too long on this, all right, but it is worthwhile thinking about, in your country, what are the big signals that are signaling a shift to a regenerative economy? Because this is exciting, right? And when we're talking about how do you get business and finance on board, you talk about the shift that's happening, right? There is an opportunity here. There is a shift that's happening to move towards a regenerative economy. In Australia, right, what that is playing out at, we've got the TNFD, all right, which is basically big businesses having to report on how much they're damaging nature or not. We've got the well-being budget happening in Australia, and other countries are having versions of this well-being budget as well. We've got the nature repair market bill, which is, again, huge economic stimulus. At the same time, in the purple box, you've got questions being asked around GDP. Is gross domestic product the right way to measure progress, right? I think this comes to your question, Louise, around growth, right? Is growth at all costs the right measure for economic progress? No way. It's such an antiquated system, but it's the system that we work within at the moment. So we need to think of new ways to measure progress. Now, one way that we can do that is by understanding the multi-dimensional impact of regenerative enterprise. So what I mean by that is the traditional climate tech venture might be, the equation is the largest amount of carbon that can be reduced in the shortest amount of time for the least amount of cost, right? The lowest cost. Now that's the model that most governments will be working with at the moment, but that will also perpetuate the current extractive, economic model, because again, we'll see companies and people with privilege will be the ones that build them, which are therefore the ones that extract the most finance from this new model. The wonderful and interesting thing about regenerative enterprises, and I would encourage you to explore this, is all the other impact, multi-dimensional impact that regenerative enterprises have. So yes, there might be a carbon drawdown or carbon mitigation, but because they are embedded in community, there is also community wealth building. They're also building wealth for communities, right? Which then gets spread across communities, which then builds community resilience, which then has positive benefits for mental health in communities and positive health benefits in communities. So there's physical and social impact benefits as well. They might also have natural capital and biodiversity benefits. So you've got all these wonderful benefits that are happening within social and within regenerative enterprises that are not currently being rewarded within our current economic model. So, that's one issue that we need to sort of try and address. This is an example. This is an example of a great regenerative enterprise. This is an Indigenous-led, a First Nations-led seaweed company from here in Australia. They are innovating a new model for seaweed farming called saltwater agroecology, and it's centered on First Nations knowledge systems. This is a successful business. Okay, they've got a great brand. they've got a great product, and they've got a pipeline of demand, right? There is lots of demand for their product because they tell a great story. And also seaweed, is a big business. It's a big industry. So they've got demand from hotel chains. They've got demand from, fertilizers, animal feed. But they're at a competitive disadvantage compared to a traditional business because they work at the pace of relationship building that needs to happen with First Nations communities. They're honoring First Nations wisdom and Indigenous wisdom and knowledge. And because they work with Indigenous communities to make sure that the benefits are spread, they work slower. Therefore, they're at a competitive disadvantage. So those of us that are in the business of supporting regenerative enterprise need to think about how we level the playing field. The other thing is these types of businesses are not suitable for traditional venture capital, right? Because venture capital is looking for, a 10x exit in the fastest amount of time. Now, that's not, the pace that these businesses are going at. They're going for 10x impact or 100x impact. So, our financial models that currently stimulate innovation, like VC, like venture capital, are not working for these types of businesses. Impact investment is also not really suitable because impact investment is usually engineered towards huge industrial scale ventures, right? An industrial scale enterprise. It could be a solar farm or a wind farm or, 1,000-hectare regenerative agriculture farm. So how do we make sure that we're making the resources accessible for these regenerative enterprises? Now, a lot of people will say, well, that surely they're too small, right? But the interesting thing about, I'm just going to skip forward, regenerative enterprise is that they can achieve impact at scale, right? But that scale isn't through vertical scaling. It's not through kind of traditional scaling models. It's through replication. And so what we're seeing with these models of regenerative enterprise is that they are generous and open with sharing IP because they're in it for the impact, right? They might be very successful in one part, in their region, right? And they want the model to replicate into other regions. But at the moment, they're not incentivized to do that. So we need to make financial models that incentivize replication so that these models can replicate into other communities, other parts of the country, whatever country they're in. And finance can enable that to happen because through replication, we will see impact at scale, and we'll also see all the other types of multidimensional impact as well. So, worth bearing that in mind. This is a really good quote about how traditional finance is not suitable for regenerative enterprise. So this is from a regenerative tourism platform that we're supporting, at Regen Labs. And the quote is, it's hard to get capital. We're not profit maximizing for shareholders, right? We're benefit maximizing for members or for the community. Explaining to investors is hard. VC venture capital wasn't interested. Bank capital wasn't appropriate. Corporate investors are too focused on the marketing budget. They're looking for different things. They're looking for different outcomes. So how do we innovate financial models that are suitable? Well, the space that we work in, the really interesting emerging sector is around what's called catalytic finance. It's an emerging investment category that sits between traditional philanthropy, so donations, and impact investing. And it kind of sits in between that space. And we like to say it just makes the money work a little bit harder. So investment capital, catalytic finance is investment capital that is patient, all right? So it's okay. It says it's okay for this, the paybacks to be over longer periods of time or the impact to happen over longer periods of time. It's risk tolerant, which is really important because we're talking about stimulating innovation at scale around the world. It's concessionary, and it's flexible, and it's an essential tool to support impact-driven enterprises and organizations that lack access to capital on suitable terms through the conventional marketplace. So you can kind of see on the right-hand side where it sits. You've got conventional investing, sustainable investing, impact investing, catalytic finance, and then philanthropic grant making. So this is the kind of finance that is increasingly needed to enable and to stimulate and to catalyze regenerative innovation and a regenerative, to catalyze these regenerative business models that we just need to be supporting to get through the valley of death, so that they can come out the other side and then start to explore scale and replication. So I might pause there. That's a sort of a super quick kind of run through, some tangible examples, and also what those of us that think about design, and about building communities of practice, and about innovation, sort of, the space for innovation is ripe in this world.
I think it's super, super interesting. And what I hear from you is also that like we're going from a more status quo to more of a reformative, transformative type of businesses. Because if we talk about like status quo, we're talking about these businesses that they are understanding that something's wrong, something is out there in the world, but they are still operating in the same system. So we are still talking about like growth, how we still keep doing the things the same way. And then when we shift to a more reformative or transformative type of economy, businesses also need to understand their role on this, because it's not just going to the Congress and try to change a bill or make top-down decisions to be changed that are going to change the system. And that's why I think it's a really interesting conversation for Impact Hubs, because we are the ones that are actually on the ground talking to those businesses, and we're actually trying to make them understand what are their specific role. I think something that I always see on Impact Hub that I see very powerful is the impact that we have just by having those different types of businesses. Anyhow, we are introduced in this capitalistic world where things are being moved by money, and anyways, like things are constructed to work that way, and we need to have food in our table, we need to do stuff, we need to live our lives. And then in the end, businesses that are actually doing this, but doing this with an impact in the end, just like thinking things from the beginning on how I can impact my community, my environment, all of this, we're already shifting the system a lot on bringing like this, as this is an advocacy by itself, just by existing those businesses. They are kind of like talking, okay, we can do transformation, we can do regeneration, all of this while we're still trying to change the system from within. And then talking a little bit about that, when we talk about regenerative economies, we're talking about economies that help us not just reduce emissions and challenge the current system, but also to keep us within the planetary boundaries, as you said. So like talking about ocean acidification, talking about climate change, talking about, I don't know, nitrogen, phosphorus in the system, all of this. If we talk about this framework, we're trying to keep ourselves within this planetary boundary. I was going to ask, what are the opportunities that you see on investments for businesses that are doing this? I think you brought a little bit of the catalytic investment, but could you elaborate a little more on like what have you seen being done with your experience on investment in this type of businesses?
Yeah, I think the impact investing sector is maturing, right? It's maturing fast. So, traditionally, impact investing may have been, commercial investing with a little bit of impact, or negative screening, or responsible investing and ESG-based sort of screening. And I think what we're seeing now is a bigger understanding within the investment community, the mainstream investment community, that they have to make their investment, their capital, work harder. That, it's not enough to just have a negative screen for, tobacco or firearms. Like, you actually need to think about how you can make your investment work harder, and identify businesses. Now, businesses that can achieve that sort of positive impact, regenerative impact. I think what's also good in terms of innovation that I've seen is the growth of robust impact measurement and impact projection tools, because investors obviously want to know exactly, they right down to the minute detail, what is the output of their investment, whether it's a financial dividend or whether it's an positive impact dividend. So there has been some really healthy innovation and growth in impact measurement tools and impact projection tools, which is great, and that has been catalyzed by global frameworks like the TCFD and the TNFD, which are basically disclosure frameworks so businesses are having to report on carbon or about biodiversity loss. That's stimulating a class of innovation around impact capture and impact measurement, which is good. So that's great, right? Now, the next kind of frontier for me is about how do we make that capital work even harder? So, like the space that I work in is around concessionary finance, because that is about catalytic finance, because we need to be stimulating the next round of innovation. We need to be catalyzing the next round of innovation about regenerative business models. And those business models are not currently rewarded within our current economic system. So we need some brave, courageous investors and philanthropists that are going to be the ones on the frontier that are going, no, we're going to catalyze this next move. They're going to be the first movers. And then hopefully, our policies and our other economic frameworks can catch up. I think it's good now that there is movement happening. So there is more literacy around regenerative economies. It's still very buzzwordy though, right? Like, very buzzwordy. If you ask 10 people on the street what a regenerative economy means, maybe 2 or 3 might say it's got something to do with farming. And the rest probably don't know. And that's fine, right? Because, if you don't live or breathe it, you don't know. So there is still more work to do to normalize regenerative economy in the same way that sustainability has been normalized in business circles. Most people will understand what sustainability means. Increasingly, we're understanding what circular economy means. I mean, it's becoming more mainstream. A simple way of defining a regenerative economy is essentially a circular economy plus a distributed economy. And if you sort of join up circular economy and distributed economy, then you kind of get this wonderful new system, regenerative economic system. So yeah, still more work to be done, but the investment community is moving. Again, I think our role, the people that work as conveners or, creating spaces for thinking, is to continue to stretch their thinking as impact investors.
Yeah, that's super interesting. And it's also like a question how we make it mainstream, not just like taking out the actual meaning of this word. Because like when we talk about sustainability, for example, at some point, if we don't define what sustainability is for the different sectors, as it is so broad, sometimes it's like it's been said by different businesses in a way that in the end has no meaning. So also like how we actually make it mainstream without making it meaningless. So it's
Yeah.
a good question. And then
we had a question from Karaz, I think.
Yeah.
Karaz Manzi.
I was going to bring
Great
this question. Yeah. If you
Yeah,
wanna go on.
So what's the difference between between regenerative economy and circular economy? Well, I think circular economy is part of a regenerative economy. But it can't be a circular economy within our current economic paradigm, right? And I'll give you an example. Near where I live here I live in a little town called Moss Vale, south of Sydney in Australia. There is a big community campaign happening at the moment because there is a plastics recycling plant that is going to be built in this town. Now, traditionally, right, that plant would have been celebrated within the new model of circular economy. It's like, great, we're recycling plastics. However, that plastics recycling plant, which is being built with overseas foreign direct investment, so the profits will leave the community. They'll be leaked out of the community. There'll be no benefit to the community apart from maybe a few jobs, but there'll be huge impact on the local water systems because of the amount of water that's used in a plastic recycling plant, and it's being built 500 meters from a school, right? And you've got microplastics and pollution. And so that's just one example about if you only take the circular economy within our current economic model and you don't account for the other impacts or the other opportunities to regenerate, then we'll still see the same impacts that we're seeing now. We'll see impacts on people, we'll see impacts on communities, we'll see impacts on nature. So we need a circular economy. We also need that to be joined at the hip with a distributed economy that really serves people and serves nature. And then hopefully we'll see this new economic paradigm flourish. If you want to learn a little bit more about some of the best thinking in this space, you can visit a website called Donut Economics Action Lab. So Donut Economics is kind of like, the leading thinking around regenerative economies. And it's leading because it's about putting it in practice in a city or in a town. Like, how do we actually make this thing work? How do we make a regenerative economy work in practice? And so Kate Rayworth is an Oxford economist, and she wrote a great book called Donut Economics. And that is a really good explainer about where circular economy fits into a regenerative economy.
I think that's good that you brought that, because most of when we're talking about circular economy and Impact Hub, we actually like use the Donut economics frameworks. And then
Right.
I was going to ask you like how it is connected to the regenerative economies, because when we talk about like regenerative economics, we not just see the economy being circular, but we also look for the inner circle. So talking about like society, environment, and this kind of things. So it's good that you brought this connection between this, and then just like connecting to other type of conversation that we're also going to have today. We're going to have a conversation about post growth, degrowth, decoupling, green growth later today. So I just wanted to understand from you, like also how regenerative economy also connect to degrowth conversation, post growth conversation, decoupling. How do you see that?
Yeah, look, caveat, I'm not an economist, so I'm not going to give a whole bunch of detailed information about post-growth, steady state economics. Like, I'm not the right person for that. But what I will say within the space that I work in is, and I think this kind of relates to the question around, does this mean we can't see a return on investment for investors? Yeah, I think we still can, right? But we just need the right kind of incentives in place. So, as we know, like sort of negative externalized costs are not borne by big polluters. They're not borne by, so the costs that are created in producing electricity in terms of pollution, big polluters don't have to pay for that. So first of all, we want a system where and at the moment, you can be an investor and you can invest money, and an electricity company will make you lots of money because someone else is paying the negative costs. The other people is us, right? We're the ones that are having to deal with climate change. So first of all, yes, we can still make, investors can still make money. We just need the incentive structures to change. We need governments to put policies in place that incentivize positive community impact, or resilience in communities. Increasingly, resilience has to be incentivized because these natural disasters are not going to stop, unfortunately. So we need models that reward and incentivize positive externalized impacts instead of negative externalized impacts, and then investors will be able to invest and do their job. Again, that's within our current system, and there are questions to be asked around should at the moment, the system is we will connect a startup with an investor. The investor has all the power, right? The startup has no power. The community has no power. So should be those very, very small amount of investors be the ones that hold all the power? No. Like ultimately, the people on the ground in these communities that are building these new businesses, they should control the flows of finance as well, right? And there's some really good thinking happening around community wealth building, place-based capital, that is all around shifting, who controls the finance. So, but for now, we're within a system where traditionally investors, they have the money, they make the investment decisions, and they make some kind of return. Now, it may not be for catalytic finance. You may not be talking about 12% return on investment. It might be a 6% return on investment because you're getting all this other wonderful impact as well, which is why we're not going to see the entire investment community move straight away. But we need some early movers to move, and then we need government to catch up and put in place the right kind of policies to reward and incentivize those kinds of investments. So when it comes to sort of post-growth, degrowth, there are all conversations that need to be had. I think we need to have a conversation around GDP, and it's great that there are countries that are now starting to go, is this the right way to measure progress? No. I think growth is a loaded word because we associate growth with, like climate change, because, it's impossible to keep growing on a finite planet. But then you think about, well, growth in innovation, or growth in services, or growth in creativity, right? Imagine if we valued the arts the way that we value gambling, then we would see growth in the arts. We would see growth in creativity. So I'm not opposed to growth. It's just growth in the right sectors that need to be rewarded.
Nice. And Maria, she just like posted a follow-up question on, she was questioning whether they still need to earn money when we're talking about that, as she thinks investment should be rethought to truly move from money, from the privilege to the people with impact.
Yeah,
And
absolutely. Yeah, and we definitely we live within a system, a monetary policy, system where fiscal policy is important and people need to earn a living, and there is interesting innovation happening. Everyone thought that blockchain crypto was going to replace our monetary systems. It hasn't yet, but we've still got people have still got to earn a living, right? I think, but we just got to it's exactly what you said. We need to think about how we shift power and influence from a centralized model of a few to a distributed model that rewards community-based impacts and also rewards nature-based regeneration and other positive benefits.
And a final question then, as we're running out of time, I'm connecting to this conversation with your experience on Regen Lab. What have you seen as like challenges to actually connect those different actors and actually bring this conversation to the big players and actually make something that they're going to accept or buy to make it happen? How do you see like the challenges of this, and how do you see the future for this?
I'm really positive about the future. It's inevitable, right? One thing is inevitable is like climate change is happening. There's nothing we can do about the next few decades. We'll continue to see impacts increase. We need to do everything we can, right, to mitigate now and draw down CO2. But our economy will change. It's changing and it will continue to change. And so business will see those opportunities. Business is shifting. There are already big businesses, big corporates that call themselves regenerative businesses, right? Unilever is a great example. Unilever is a B Corp, certainly is in Australia anyway. It calls itself a regenerative business. So it's now thinking about how its supply chains, how its procurement spend can be used to support regenerative business. So when you get big players like that, that sends a signal to the rest of the sector. And those signals are already starting to happen. So it's not like this is, really fringe, just sort of happening at the fringe. Like there is already big businesses that are starting to refer to themselves as regenerative business. So I'm feeling pretty positive. The transition is underway. It's really just about how can we be catalyzing the innovation now so that we've got the right business models that can satisfy all the demand that's going to happen over the next few sort of 10 to 20 years.
Nice. And it's good that you brought Unilever as well, because we're going to have a session with them also today later, talking about how they have been working with different businesses around the world on using SDGs and helping them on connecting businesses and SDGs for sustainable development when we're talking about development. So cool. I wanted to open this 10 last minutes for questions. So I want to open for the public. Does anyone has any question you would like to bring to Reese as he's still here for the final moments? Okay, Maria.
Hi, everyone, and thanks for sharing, Reese. That was very insightful. I think what's continuing to be a challenge is that we measure the impacts beyond the financial metrics, and that we make that attractive for people. It doesn't have to be investors, but also for crowdfunding to invest in, and storytelling is very crucial. What I'm doubting is that every solution needs to be scalable. Like we work on the ground with lots of great small businesses that depend on their owners. I don't think they all need to be scalable if they're locally rooted and transparent. They can be replicable, but that's not their task, I think. What do you think?
Oh, I completely agree. I think scale within our current, the way that we currently think about scale is unhelpful. I think there will be some businesses that may scale and scale quickly, but absolutely, when we're talking about place-based enterprise, it is satisfying a need and a purpose in its place, and really the impact is what we're looking to scale within that place. But replication is a much more interesting and healthy model, I think, for a regenerative enterprise, because you think about like the innovator's dilemma, right? The startup dilemma. The first 1 or 2 years, you're just experimenting, and you're experimenting with nothing. And so, how can we help communities or social entrepreneurs, regenerative entrepreneurs, shortcut that process by sort of nurturing networks that facilitate replication. And so if they can learn from a partner organization about all the mistakes they made, and it's, I guess, part of what the Impact Hub network does, right? If they can learn, then you're shortcutting a whole bunch of errors that they don't need to make, and they probably don't have the time or capacity to make either. And so I think again, thinking about what tools do we have in our toolkit? It's learning networks, and knowledge sharing. It's also financial models that incentivize sharing best practice and sharing knowledge and supporting replication, and getting investors to invest in models that replicate, and encouraging replication and knowledge sharing.
Super. Time for one more question before we wrap up. Anyone has any specific question? I'll give you 10 seconds to think about it. Okay, if not,
I'm still grabbing the coffees for the day. I know it's super early where everyone else is. It's late for me, but yeah.
No,
enjoy the day ahead. It sounds like a really interesting program ahead. So I wish I could stay around. It sounds fascinating.
That's super good. No, and we're super excited with all the conversation. We're super happy to have you here for this conversation to kick off everything. Already talking about like regenerative economies, how we change everything from the beginning. So it was super, super exciting to have you here. Just wanted to thank you in name of everyone, in name of Impact Hub, to be participating here with us. We're closing this first session, but next session, we're going to be talking with some businesses on the ground. So we have 6 businesses that are connected to the Impact Hubs that are going to be exploring a little bit more on what are they doing to actually tackle challenges, environmental challenges in their own realities. So we have 6 businesses plus a community partner, which you're going to understand a little bit more. Also, if you don't know what a community partner is at the Impact Hub network, you're going to explore it a little bit more today. So just wanted to thank you, Riz, so much for the conversation. It was really insightful. And then for everyone else, see you in the next sessions. Thanks, everyone.
Pleasure. See you later.
See you.
See you. Have a good day.